All right, guys, we're in July, and then July means ICAST in the dominant fishing community down in Florida. And it's always interesting to see, what shows up at ICAST. Typically, a lot of the things you'll see a little bit 6, 8, 10, 12 months before they actually come to ICAST. A lot of times, if you're following, certainly if you're going out to a lot of events, whether it be Major League Fishing events, some Bass Pro Tour events or Bass Elite Series events and Bassmaster, because a lot of those anglers, I would say a lot. Quite a few of those anglers are utilizing baits that are not on the market, okay? They are in development. And some of that could be sizes, some of that could be colors. At ICAST coming up, you're probably going to see size differentiators, meaning sizes that have not been available pre-July 2025 in, for example, the Mooch Minnow and the Freeloader from Crush City Rapala, okay? Things like that. They're not reinventing the wheel from last year. They're just adding some different colors or different sizes. A lot of times that's an easy thing at ICAST to release for a known entity. But then there's also those opportunities at ICAST for things to get released that are brand new, that no one really knew they were going to show up. The showcase, right? And so in 2023, you kind of had to know that the trajectory of the fishing community, and what I mean by that is, I don't mean that 99% of us, okay? I mean the projected fishing community media as well as the professional media, okay? Meaning Bassmaster's media, MLF's own media, in-house media. They control their own media and what they're going to project out to the broader fishing community. And of course, everybody remembers in 2023, the big debate was forward-facing sonar going into 2024. What showed up at ICAST in 2024, okay, were soft plastics and terminal tackle specifically dedicated to horizontal, vertical fishing, forward-facing sonar to meet that craze, okay? One sets up the other. ICAST sets up the retail environment. Remember, ICAST is not a consumer show, okay? So it is a dealer show. So MLF, Bassmaster, magazines, all that stuff, they set the narrative. The products from the industry get to ICAST. Then from ICAST, they get to your retailer, okay? That's pretty much how it works. A lot of people call it the fishing cabal, okay, because that's how it works. Most people probably didn't buy the hover rig, okay, after ICAST. 95% of people who have a fishing rod probably didn't invest in a hover rig, okay? Maybe they don't have forward-facing sonar. Maybe they didn't understand the technique or the technology based around it. Any number of factors, okay? But still, the hover rig was a dominant player in 2024, coming into ICAST and coming out of ICAST. Not only just the terminal tackle, which I'm going to show you here, but as well as the soft plastics, okay? You also got to remember, perfect timing, right? For that rig to come out when Rapala releases Crush City, okay? And then the new items that got released out retail-wise at major big box stores for Crush City, okay? Those are how things kind of line up on the calendar, okay? But the hover rig is now pretty much 5 years old. And when I say that, people are going to be like, oh, well, it was in Japan for 2 years. A dominant player in Japan for 2 years before it really got talked about in 2023 in America, okay? And now we're in 2025. So it's been about a 5-year evolution. The Japanese are actually now in the evolution stages now because they're further along, okay? So you're going to see some newer twists and things on the hover rig coming out of Japan, all right? In America, we've had some, some brands that have, kind of filled the niche in America. Think Core Tackle, for one. That's a prime example of a brand. Northland would probably be another brand with the Smeltinator. I'll cover that here in a second. That kind of perform the same form and function. And then like a Brazzalo, I think, had one that was a cover style rig, custom bait maker. And obviously their buzz baits made some noise recently in the professional ranks at one of the events. You know what I mean? So again, this is kind of the evolution of what happens is, once something hits the market, then you end up seeing kind of innovative or copies, I dare say copies, duplications of the original. Think chatterbait, right? Like that kind of thing. But it's interesting to see that the core main line, at least for me, the core, and I don't mean Core Tackle, sorry guys, the core hover rig, 3 or 4, now 2 years, actually 2023, so 2 years out of Japan having these before they got to ICAST in 2024, before there was all this big thing. A lot of people weren't using them for Livescope forward-facing sonar. That kind of came about, a little later in the evolution of the actual bait, because there are a number of different ways you can use these baits that you don't need forward-facing sonar, and that's what gets lost. So many of these mid-strolling bait, now, that's the other thing. Everything was kind of lumped together, forward-facing sonar, Livescape, hover rigs, but that's just not the case. There's now, coming out of Japan, so many levels, meaning there's like a shallow, there's a mid-stroller, there's a deep stroller for hover strolling, okay? In America, you pretty much are seeing one size, like a one-size-fits-all, okay? But over in Japan, you've got these things in multiple sizes, multiple weights, because in Japan, a lot of the weights can get heavy in terms of the grams because of how they're fishing and what they're fishing, and their lakes being as deep as they are. And so that's an interesting thing as well when you look at JDM baits and you're looking at sizes and trying to do the conversions in your head, and you're back in Mrs. Johnson's freaking, math class in elementary school trying to figure out ounces to grams to whatever to figure out, and then he shows up in the mail and you've got a freaking 2-ounce freaking jig head, okay? It happens. Trust me, I hear the stories. So that's just kind of development of the thing. So hover rigs is, it's still a dominant fish catcher, okay? But you don't need forward-facing sonar or Livescope to utilize it by any means. Forward-facing sonar and Livescope, in terms of locate your fish. I've always made this argument. They're great at locating your fish, and then, you saw so many guys on screens at some of these professional events that were just dropping down these freaking hover rigs right in front, or leading the bass, and people got all upset with forward-facing sonar because they didn't want to stare at guys' asses while they fished all day. I totally understand that. And then the hover rig got all wrapped up in that. But in reality, you can use the hover rig in any number of different techniques and presentations out on your fishery, depending on what size you go to. And so for me, the dominant players are still the Japanese hover rigs, okay? That, to me, in terms of just success rates, catch rates, variety to change your depths, are still those hover rigs. Now, we'll see if we see a continuation. And the reason why I'm doing this video is I want you guys to think about it. You're hearing a lot of noise about forward-facing sonar going away. You're hearing a lot of noise about Livescope getting banned at trails in Texas, team trails in Texas. Bassmaster may make a change. We already know what MLF has. The NPFL last year went full bore, no forward-facing sonar Livescope, okay? So we're in a different place in 2025 than we were in 2023, okay? I want you to think, put your marketing cap on now and your sales cap on, okay? So if all these things are flipping back, why would we see a major exposure of forward-facing sonar and Livescope at ICAST? Because the trajectory now has shifted, right? So it will be interesting to see how the bait makers evolve, because they've spent a lot of money. Okay, a lot of money in development, a lot of money in not only the terminal tackle, especially in North America, but also the soft plastics to go with that terminal tackle. And then if the narrative flips that now we're pulling back from that kind of forward-facing sonar and Livescope, what's going to happen to the hover rig? Okay, for me, I believe that argument does an absolute complete injustice to the hover rig and the hover strolling technique. Okay, you don't need Livescope for that, but likely you're probably going to see less people, right? Because that's how the market is. The market keeps moving, right? And so it'll be interesting to see at ICAST whether or not the hover rig and companion baits, okay, are big players. Now, I don't put Crush City Rapala in that, because that's already been around. They're just releasing colors and sizes, and it's not like they've come out with a new line or a new bait or a new one for a specific technique. That's an extension of a product already in the marketplace. Okay, so that one's a little different. But I mean new products. Okay, it's going to be interesting to see how the market accepts those new products. If at the top down, we're moving away from Livescope and forward-facing sonar, which dominates the narrative in fishing. Okay. And like I said, it does an injustice to a lot of the products that some of these professional anglers are utilizing for forward-facing sonar, but they are not solely based on that. Okay, so the first one obviously is still, for me, the staple in hover strolling, and has remained so for 5 years, 4 or 5 years, and that is the Horizon Head. This is a Horizon Head LG, 3.5 gram Horizon Head. Okay, everybody should have this Gamakatsu Horizon Head, regardless of whether or not you have forward-facing sonar or not. It is just a universally fish catcher. Okay, depending on what soft plastic, what you want to rig it with, it is an open book, in my opinion. It was originally, I want to say it was one of the first ones to come into America from Japan, if I'm not mistaken. At least retail-wise, in terms of, because Gamakatsu has a big footprint in North America. Okay, so this is the 3.5 gram Horizon Head. Okay, you can see that. And for me, I'll be honest with you, I believe this was the one that was copied the most. If you look at most knockoff Horizon Heads, custom pours, it mimics exactly what the Horizon Head looked like. Now, there could be some differentiators in the line top. There could be a whole bunch of stuff, but I'm just saying in terms of form and function. Okay, so this is a 3.5. I utilize the 3.5 probably the most. Okay, but then this is the 4.4 gram. Okay, 2/0 hook, 1/0 hook. Okay, I prefer the 1/0 hook because I target smallmouth predominantly, guys. Okay, I love fishing for smallmouth predominantly, so I love to use the 1/0 hook. Smaller style soft plastic, smaller baits. You can do finesse, doesn't have to be forward-facing sonar. Okay, and then obviously I've got the 4.4. Predominantly, I'll use the 4.4 in the Tidal Potomac or situations like that. Okay, Gamakatsu. Okay, numerous sizes, weights. You can check them out. Obviously, you've got your different size hooks as well. You can pretty much find this one now at most big box in America. Okay, now the second one that the folks that I've talked to that utilize this one absolutely freaking love it. Okay, but it doesn't get as much press. Okay, as much coverage, unless you're following a JDM channel or two on YouTube or something. But you don't see it that much in stores. You pretty much have to buy it online, and that's the BR Head. Okay, and this right here, it's different from Duo. Okay, it is a different. It's in the family, but has a little bit of a different nuance to it. Okay. In terms of strolling, all right? It's also got, if you look here, it's got that those edges, wings, in the pour, okay? In the lead pour. You see that, okay? It's got the keeper. Not as many sizes in this. This is a 3 gram, okay? And again, 1/0 hook size, okay? I kind of try to keep my stuff consistent, all right? Now, what's interesting about this bait is, unlike just terminal tackle, Duo came out with, in their development of this terminal tackle, came out with the soft plastic built specifically for this rig. Okay? And it's unique in the sense of how it fits, all right? But by no means do you have to use the bait rope, okay? And here's what I've done, because unfortunately, I will say this, the one downside to this, for me, and maybe not for you, if you're fishing like a lot of lakes with shad, natural shad color, things like that, then you've got the colors, the good colors. I'm not a big fan of the color line, okay, for Duo in this particular. Now, I'm hearing they're supposed to be coming out with new colors. Raid is coming out with new colors for the fish roller. They're starting to roll out and show up in North America, okay? They're starting to show up. Their fish on, their skin size, their hand-painted soft plastic fish rollers in 2 different sizes, okay? And I've done video. You can search my YouTube channel. I've done a couple videos on the fish roller, and I've got various sizes and things like that for the same that go on all this terminal tackle. But as far as Duo goes, their colors aren't really, like for me, the best, okay? And so, but what you can do is you can take other coloration, other swim baits or other fluke style or pin style or ball style, whatever you want in terms of split tail that you want. What you want to do is you want to cut, I don't know if you can see this or not, but you want to cut straight across about an 1/8 of an inch to, not as much as a quarter, but cut it straight. So that'll butt right up against that jig head, okay? Because that's what you want. Because that is what you don't, if you put say a Kitech and you don't do anything with it, you're going to change the action, okay? I'm not going to say you're not going to get bit, but what happens is that water gets in between your soft plastic it's a rounded head, in between, and it sticks, and you can see how it acts really weird on your line when you try that, okay? So you want to make sure that if you're going to use this, you're not going to use this, that you cut straight so it's square. Make it as square as possible, and then bump it up onto that BR head, okay? Just a neat tip for you. Now, my favorite that I utilize probably more than any of them, because it's so universal, especially for smallmouth, is the smelt head. Okay? Right there. Number of sizes that it comes in. Okay? And coloration patterns. Okay? So, let's talk about colors. Okay? This is the smelt. Alright? Dominant in the Northeast, Midwest, whatever. You can't go wrong with smelt. Okay? Work everywhere, in my opinion, I think. So you've got smelt, you've got black, okay, see that black on that, all right, you've got white pearl, okay, again, these are all different sizes. These come in green pumpkin, if you can find the green pumpkin, okay, I mean, that thing sells out all the time. I get more requests for freaking green pumpkin when I get some in. Wagasaki is another one. Those two, I get more requests for those two when I can get those from Japan. All right? You got your regular black, blueback herring, another one. I've never even seen that blueback herring one. It's always sold out. And then emerald shiner. Okay? So, those, 6, 7 different colorations, okay, to the smelt head. All right? And you can see, I'll pull the big one up. This is a 2.7, 2-aught. See, they all have that same, like what we associate with the hover rig, right? In terms of that, as opposed to a standardized regular jig head, right? It doesn't have that. But you got multiple sizes, and now they've come out with the Plus, which is Smelt Head Plus, which is an underspin on this jig. You're seeing those variations now, offering you the ability to fish what would be a strolling jig in other ways in the water column, okay? And so, here, like I said before, the 2.7, 2/0, so 1/8, 1/0, okay, for smaller, more finessey presentations. The Smelt in the 1/8, 1/0, and the Smelt, obviously, and this was my bigger one, which is a 3.7, okay, and a 2/0, so a lot heavier. When you feel these things in your hand, you'll know what I'm talking about in terms of the weight. This is not even the biggest one that they have, okay? They get up there. And those are pretty much, to me, those are the staples that you should have. Definitely Gamakatsu. If it's your first run, utilizing it in different ways, and get yourself whatever soft plastics you want. None of the soft plastics that you're going to think of, Hog Farmer and Kitech and all that Megabass, they all work freaking phenomenal on the Horizon head. It is a great entry level hover. Missile, which is in Virginia, Missile Baits has come out with the hover missile, I think. It's another, adaptation of the hover rig. Like I said, Core Tackle, Brazalo. There are some custom. Northland has the Smeltinator. I think it's called the Smeltinator, which is more similar to this style. Than the ball head style that most people are familiar with when they think of a hover rig. They don't think of a jig head. A couple things with this that are important to understand. To keep the trailer. The trailers, the soft boxes you put in this, never have any issues with. That's always a problem with some of the other ones. The long head on this, you probably see it with this one better. The head on this, actually in the water, it works just like, say, your lip on your crankbait. It does, okay? Based on where that tie is, okay, line tie, and then in the distance and the slope, okay, to that, all right? So when you're working it through the water, it's doing exactly what that lip, that square bill lip does, or even that jerkbait lip does in terms of water displacement. So it fundamentally works that way too. You can swim this as well, okay? Takes a little bit. You got to have the right line, the right rod, okay? But you can definitely work this in some unique ways when you're going above 2.7, in my opinion. It doesn't work as well if you're staying in the 1.8, the smaller. That's not what it's meant for. You certainly can try. But when you cast this thing, it swims head down, okay? Like it's searching for depth, okay? And you're pulling it, right? Whether you're cranking or whether you're using your rod tip, which is what I like to do, okay? I like to just use the rod tip and let it fall, and then use the rod tip and then let that weight and that head fall, okay? That's how I like to do it when I'm not doing some other stuff. But it keeps that for the guys with using graphs or whatever, it'll keep that horizontal, vertical horizontal thing that they love. I just don't think most people are utilizing that for that necessarily. I think they're more or less utilizing more of the ball head type hover rigs that I've seen, in terms of, mostly for vertical and cast fishing, with forward-facing sonar. But that's going to be interesting to see what we see with the hover rigs, okay? Will we see more hover rig innovation at 2025 ICAST coming up? Or is it moving? Is it going to go away because of what we're seeing at the top level of the professional ranks, okay? The more and more people push away against forward-facing sonar and Livescope on national professional trails, the less you're going to see these baits being pushed and being sold and being developed to fulfill that technique. Okay, that's what happens. A lot of times we buy what we see, and the industry knows that, and the industry kind of like expects that and plans for that, and that's how they develop everything. And the marketing comes first, the push comes first, the anglers come first, and then the product ends up in the marketplace. It's all prepackaged and pre-built in. Okay, and so that's typically what happens for the major brands. So we'll see. ICAST coming up here next week. Going to be interesting to see. Last year, Hover, forward-facing sonar, Livescope, a major player at ICAST. This year, what will be the major player?